待会儿吧。All right. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to people in different parts of the world. I'm Jean Lee from China Europe International Business School based in Shanghai. You can tell from the background, this is one of the buildings in the school. Today we are going to have this webinar organized by the Academy of Management International Management Division. And the theme of today's webinar, it's called Innovative Teaching Using Real Situations and Gamification. And let me show you, innovative teaching using real situations and gamification. And tonight, I have two of my good friends here. Shamin Prasanta, it's the Professor of International Business and Strategy. He's currently the Associate Dean at the CIBS, in charge of our MBA program. And Shamin is also very known for his work at intersection of global strategy and entrepreneurship on partnering between large multinationals and startups. And he has this course, what we call real situation learning. It's a company-based case teaching, globalizations of Chinese companies. And he will share some of his very innovative teaching methods in this course. And my next speaker, it's Marlene Dellerman. And Marlene, it's a very old friend. We knew each other from like years ago in the US. So she holds the Peter Lawrence Chair in Family Business at IMD currently. In her research areas, it's on governance, strategy, internationalization, innovation and transformations of emerging markets enterprise, and in particular family business. So she's going to share with you one of the very interesting methods that she adopts, Walking Family Business Workshop. I heard about it from her like maybe last year, and I'm very look forward to her sharing. So we're going to have two speakers. This is the sequence. Each speaker will speak for about maybe 20-25 minutes. And then at the end, we're going to have Q&A for maybe 10 minutes. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to pass over to Shamin to start part one, company-based case teaching. Shamin, you want to?
Jean, thank you very much. It's great to be here with all of you virtually. Greetings from Shanghai. And as Jean said, I'm going to be talking about a particular approach we take to trying to bring alive the case method. The first example, the main example I'm going to use is a course we teach about the globalization of Chinese companies, but I will also give another example as well, just to give another version of how we use this approach. So this is in fact an approach that this school, China Europe International Business School, has sort of really tried to institutionalize within the school, and in fact has trademarked the English abbreviation. So it's called Real Situation Learning Method, or RSLM for short. And a blurb that you'll find in some of our documentation is that it's about bringing case studies, bringing them alive. Essentially, we try to take students to the company that the case is about, teach the case there, help them to see what the company is like, and then talk to relevant executives on the premises. But this is preceded by the professor actually teaching the case on the premises of that company, and then concluding by wrapping things up. So, it's more sort of live than a normal version that you see many people do, which is to teach the case in a classroom and bring a protagonist to the classroom, which is, of course, a fantastic way of doing things. But here the idea is to make these case studies come alive. It's a structured approach to designing the entire experience to ensure that students and faculty benefit instead of simply sharing prepackaged company presentations. Executives are faced with questions from fully engaged students who have not only read the case about the firm, but have also seen their organization in action through a company visit. So what I'm going to endeavor to do is to give you a couple of examples to show you how we actually try to do this. So there are 4 steps to this. As I said, we actually teach the case. So when we arrive at the company, we ask the company to give us something that we can use like a classroom, typically their conference room. And when I say case discussion, I mean, ideally, we are actually, as faculty, teaching the case. And then that's followed by a company tour. Then we have relevant executives, ideally the protagonist of the case, then coming into the room and sharing their thoughts, and then taking questions from students, and then the professor will then finally do a wrap-up. So, as I said, the first example I want to use is of a course called The Globalization of Chinese Companies. And for this, we took this was an elective, and we took MBA students from Shanghai to the city of Nanjing and took them to a few companies. So the objectives of this course, I've just copied and pasted from the course outline, but it's basically the primary purpose is to understand one of the exciting developments of the Chinese economy, the internationalization of private companies, which have internationalized rapidly, and in some cases through acquiring foreign companies. So the second bullet point, as you'll see, it's aimed to develop a better understanding of this phenomenon, and we will interact with companies in Nanjing, considering opportunities and challenges. And the third bullet point is just drawing attention to the fact that this could have career implications for these MBA students to help by providing talent to the companies in this process. So one example of this, in fact, on day 1, we would go to this company called Chevron, not to be confused with the oil and gas major from Texas called Chevron. This is Chevron, which is basically a company that does power tools like drills, and had made some acquisitions overseas, including a company called Flex. So we basically spent the entire day at Chevron. So I would take about pretty much the same length of time we would take in the classroom at SEEBS. So 90-minute session. So the students would have got the case beforehand, and then we do a full-fledged discussion, and then after a quick coffee break, do a tour of the premises. So because it's a manufacturing site, we'd get into the bus and go about 5 minutes away to the manufacturing facility, come back, have lunch, and then the CEO would then give his spiel and then take questions, and then I would wrap up. So this is pretty much the typical schedule we would follow for a full day's teaching at SEEBS, and we were basically doing this on the premises at Nanjing. Now, to give you a little bit more of a sense of what this looked like, I'm going to play a brief video where you will get glimpses of what we did at Chevron, and also some reflections from 2-3 of the students who attended that session. This we were able to do more freely prior to COVID. During COVID, we actually weren't able to get to Nanjing, and I had to change the venue of the location to Shanghai. So this is pre-COVID, but it'll give you a sense of this teaching method.
I think the real situation learning method is pushing the case method one step forward. So instead of showing the students the cases on the paper, we'll actually bring the students to the sites of the companies.
We find that students get much more out of the class when we have case discussions, and combining that with this real situation, they then get a much better sense of it, first-hand feel.
So a lot of them have never really spent a long time in China, and this is their first contact point with the Chinese companies.
As an MBA student who is interested in Chinese companies going abroad and their international expansion, this was a great way to actually see them on the ground.
These are the companies who are going to globalize in the future and moving out of China, and they need internationals to bridge this gap. And so all these companies are companies which are playing a big role in terms of globalization. And that's the reason I chose this module.
Sherwon is a company based in Nanjing, which makes power tools and has expanded through acquisitions in Germany and America. The CEO of the company is one of our alumni. One of the things we do is to discuss the case on Sherwon in Sherwon and help students understand how a medium-sized Chinese company can go about its globalization through a combination of alliances, acquisitions, and its own efforts.
He was explaining all the major threats and different approaches from the strategic point of view, not only operation. It's a very interesting module, and it really helped us out to learn more about China and how Chinese companies are going global.
When I started, we started for the export, which means for the global market, mainly Europe and later on American market. But of course, at the very beginning, we're still very much acting as one of the few thousand companies in China in these industries, doing the trading business, buying products from different factories and selling to customers in the marketplace. Starting from 1999, we start to produce our products in our factory for the first time. And then since then, we continue to develop this area, becoming a leading company in China as a manufacturer for power tools. I still truly believe the business is based on people. So when you become the global companies, the global talent is very much needed. We still have continuous needs for the global talent.
So when we see companies like that actually going abroad and finding ways to move into other markets, that's actually much more viable for an MBA student to kind of learn about, rather than simply how am I going to be a part of a multi-billion-dollar M&A.
It's not only a company tour, it includes presentations, what are the challenges, how this company has been able to grow, and different insights from really senior managerial positions. I'm very grateful about this opportunity that CIBS can give us.
Okay, I sincerely hope the video worked for you where you are with your bandwidth and that the audio was okay. So hopefully you got a sense that what we were trying to do is combine what many business schools do, which is great case-based teaching, also company visits, but actually bring the two together in a highly coherent way and with very clear sort of learning output. So for example, in this case, what you'll see on the slide is the screenshot of a book called Global Expansion, the Chinese Way, which was the result of a multi-year research project involving some of my colleagues at CIBS. And in fact, Sherwon was one of the companies they had studied, and that's how the case was written. And then we talk about, particularly towards the end, what are the options that a Chinese company has in terms of how they deal with the post-merger integration. Many Chinese companies initially were taking the so-called light touch approach, making very little change at home, asking for very little change in the company that was acquired. Sherwon was actually an interesting case where they had begun to make changes. They were working with their acquiree to make changes. And so it wasn't just light touch, it was more a case of our way. So that is one example. But I also want to just give you another sense, another example to give you a sense of how also this can be used. And what is interesting in this case was that it was the reverse phenomenon. This was a Western company coming into China. But unlike, say, Disney, which spent $6.5 billion when they set up their facility in Shanghai, this was a small and medium family-owned business from Austria that makes chocolate called Zotter. Also, what I want to point out is it's not always necessary to take an entire day. So with Zotter, this is a facility they have in Shanghai. We do this more frequently than the one we do in Nanjing, and it's typically half day. So everything is somewhat truncated. The case discussion is much briefer, maybe half an hour. The company tour is about an hour. And then the discussion is about an hour. And again, the follow-up time from the faculty maybe is about 45 minutes. So this is just another variant, both in terms of the phenomenon, it's the reverse direction of travel in terms of internationalization, also much shorter version. So, and in fact, when I teach the case, to be quite frank, oh, by the way, if you went to the Harvard website, you'd see two versions of the Zotter case, one by Harvard Business School, a general case, and then one that we have done at SEEBS about their time in China. So it's Zotter chocolate creating a market in China. But to be quite frank, here, when I'm teaching the case, I'm sort of leading them through the story. There isn't that much time to actually set up the kind of typical discussion I would have in a 90-minute session. So the main question I get them to think about is talk about their internationalization trajectory. They initially went into Germany, very natural as an Austrian company, but then found Europe so competitive that for growth, they would have to go to either China or the US. And if you were a large multinational company, the answer to that question is both. Most large European multinationals have a presence both in the US and China. But as a small family-owned business, they had to make a choice. And for various reasons, which we talk about, they picked China. So then that's done. And then we have a company tour. And a chocolate company is a brilliant choice for a company tour, as you might guess. They have a wonderful chocolate theater. And so, it's just brilliant. The thing I've always wanted to do but never managed to do is to make this the last case of my course so that the teaching evaluation is done right after that. I'm sure my score would be boosted by this. But anyway, this is just always very brilliant. And then once that's done, we get back into the auditorium they have. And the China CEO of Zotter, Amy Fang, who is an EMBA alum of our course, she will do some discussion. When I'm the faculty involved, I also then sit with her to moderate the Q&A. But other professors have sort of also led this course. And then at the end, I come back and then I talk about, well, if you're not Disney and you're a relatively small company, what are some of the key things? So I talk about innovation, but also point out that a chocolate company can be hugely innovative too and very creative with the flavors they have. But very importantly, you have to learn effectively because you don't have the resources of a large company. The learning has to be done efficiently and then leveraging networks, which I emphasize a lot, and pacing growth. Growing too slow is a problem, but going too fast can be a problem too. And then the importance of understanding local context. And a point I try to make here is Zotter really doesn't have a China strategy. They have a Shanghai strategy. And within Shanghai, the particular district they picked, it was important because that's where the local partner had the networks, et cetera, et cetera. And so then that's done, and then we go home. So just to bring this to a close, what I have learned in the process, one of the things that's very useful from an international management point of view, if you think of this, we are teachers, but we are also scholars. I think both the examples I gave you illustrate how, an innovative teaching method can help students appreciate forms of international expansion, which are different from, say, the classic stage-based model that Uppsala scholars, Johansson and Wallner, made popular. Of course, this is a very thoughtful model. They talk about the importance of learning and networks. But two exceptions to, a company becoming large at home first and then going international is the emerging market story, Chinese companies basically accelerating or springboarding by acquiring companies overseas. The other is small and medium-sized companies internationalizing, and we have an example of going from China in one case to China in the other. So that's kind of useful. And the other, as a pedagogical method, I think what this does is give a show and tell. So it's not just the telling, which can happen quite effectively in the classroom, but there's an element of show. And that can have a couple of useful benefits. One, you can be pleasantly surprised. And when I've read the individual assignments after the Nanjing trip, the students I find most pleasantly surprised by the technical capability of the Chinese company when they visit the manufacturing site and so on are students from Japan and South Korea in particular, even more so than their Western counterparts. At the same time, you can also make observations of certain limitations. If you take away the CEO and COO at some of these Chinese companies, there isn't a single person there who can really speak English. And you really think there isn't a lot of talent that can hold its own in an international setting. And you can see where in the longer term some of the problems can be. So it's very much something that can be, a lot of learning takes place because you observe on site. And then just as I bring this to a close, some thoughts about some of the challenges and then some thoughts on the benefits. Now, the challenges. On paper, it seems reasonably a simple thing to do, right? Go to the premises of the company and then teach a case, etc. But actually, a lot of things, the stars have to align. The company has to be willing to do this. You have to have a case related to the company. Executives need to be available on the day and also be able to deliver an insightful discussion, which then means my second point is that access becomes very important, and schools that have a strong alumni network obviously have an advantage. And one of the things SEEBS has done is to create a scheme whereby companies like Sherborne or Zotter that regularly welcome students are given a certification and are designated as a SEEBS teaching and learning base, which they appreciate. Clearly, the logistics of doing this isn't easy, and especially the conference rooms or the auditoriums of companies don't have all the facilities of a typical classroom. So you don't have all the whiteboards that you would normally use. And so you have to kind of adjust, and it's very resource intensive. And then there's proprietary content. When a professor writes a case, will they allow another professor to use it and take it to their premises? In general, we have a collegiate environment here at SEEBS, but I think one needs to build one's own repertoire of such cases. And for me, particularly the kinds of audiences I teach, finding English speakers in these companies in China isn't easy, even in Shanghai. But benefits, as I said, the show and tell aspect of it is just incredible. And I also feel it conveys very clearly one of my strong beliefs as an international management academic, and that's the role of place. And a criticism I would make of the example I gave you is actually Nanjing in relation to internationalization isn't that meaningful. To be honest, that's a choice of convenience. We happen to have a couple of companies there, and that was a convenient place to do it in. Because of COVID, I in fact was forced to do it in Shanghai. We found a few companies there too. But I think there can be some more meaningful choices, and partly sort of foreshadowing the next presentation, which is about family business, which is also the field of interest of Jean Lee, who's moderating this. I would say a place like Ningbo, where Jean takes students to learn about family business. Those of you familiar with China will know there are many family businesses in that province and in that city. That makes a lot of sense. And then my final point is that as somebody who takes both teaching and research seriously, I have really enjoyed the synergy between teaching and research that this provides. Now, the chair of the committee, or the International Management Division Committee on Teaching, Carl Fay, was my dean in Ningbo, and maybe that's partly why I mentioned the city too. I call it my hometown in China, at the University of Nottingham, and he used to encourage us to bring research into the classroom. In this case, it was experiences that I had through this real situation learning method that informed my research as well and gave me a deeper understanding of the phenomenon of the globalization of Chinese companies. And in fact, based on what I was observing, I then went back to some of my old colleagues at Nottingham, China in Ningbo, and we wrote a piece on springboarding and emerging market multinational that we were lucky to get into JIBS. And a lot of the insight I got that went into the paper actually came through teaching that Nanjing course. And so I think that's one of the wonderful privileges we have. Research can be brought into our teaching, but our teaching can also inform our research. So I hope you found that useful, and I'll be more than happy to share further thoughts in the Q&A. But with that, let me invite Marlene Dieleman to take over and share her thoughts.
Shamin, that was very interesting. Thank you so much for handing over to me. Thank you, Jean, for inviting me on this seminar. I'd like to welcome everyone from all around the world on this webinar. Allow me to a moment to share my screen and my presentation. Let me see. What I will do with you is take you through a journey that I accidentally embarked upon when I started thinking about how to improve learning experience for my students. And I will tell you all about the failures and the journey that I've gone through and how this ended up being a, one of the most cherished elements of the educational time of students when I was in US. So it's gamified experiential learning. I'll tell you in just a second what that means. So my presentation will go like this. I'll first talk about how I stumbled upon this innovation. What was the concept, how I adapted it, because not everything that I thought of worked as well as I hoped. And then finally, how I turned into an entrepreneur because of this innovation. Now, let me start with the motivation. During COVID, I realized that most of our students, I was at the National University of Singapore, and our students were coming into Singapore, and this was their life. So our campus was closed, they couldn't go anywhere. So I said that, this cannot be the experience of our students. We really have to do something nice for these people who made that trip. So I started thinking about how we can create a different kind of learning experience if our campus is closed. And what can I do to really, really make this time they spend with us, learning with us, memorable? So never waste a good crisis. And here I got into my crazy idea, which later became a company. So let me go back for a second about why I wanted to do this experiential learning and gamification. I think these days, youngsters want experiences. Experiencing things is very much the way that people consume information. It stimulates multiple senses. It's not only an intellectual exercise, and it challenges the participants to discover things on their own rather than us as teachers telling them. And what is also really important to me is that there's no knowledge without context. It only becomes alive in a context. And if you can give that context to your students, I think they have a much deeper learning experience. So if you go out of the wall, it also gives them a great sense of variety of learning. Now, some of you have experience already with gamification. Gamification makes students super, super excited, especially if you add a team competition component to it. And when they do that as a team, it really increases the motivation for learning. And last, I wanted to also create lasting impact and memories. even if they didn't remember all the content from my course, I wanted them to remember a few key stories and moments, which would then trigger a recall effect about the material that I was teaching. Now, my course is not a traditional IB course. I was teaching family business, and I was in Singapore, as I already said. So what people think about family business as mostly small companies like restaurants and so on. But if you're in Singapore and you look at our skyline, these are some of the families that own all the buildings of our skyline. So I thought, why not take the students to those buildings, unlock the stories of the families that kind of hide behind those buildings, and then let them discover the insights about each of those families, which are actually international families. They're not just Singapore families. And then do their own discovery tour through Singapore. So that was the starting point. I'm a huge fan of escape rooms and treasure hunts. So the eventual game was a combination of those. So it's kind of like an amazing race. You go around the city, and then when you arrive, you get a small video, which is very short, maybe a little bit TikTok style, and where you get some insights from the family. And then there is some Insta-worthy photo ops. There's riddles that you have to solve as a team, and you compete against other teams. So let me tell you a little bit more how it worked. This is from the early versions. So I sent students out to different buildings. Then they had to send us a picture of them on the location. In this case, one person was online. I think this was during COVID, and he was locked down. So that picture then unlocks a video. And that's me telling something about the family business and what their international position is and what we can learn from them. And there is a little prize for the most Insta-worthy photo. So the students ended up going crazy with the photos, which later then became a major memory. So when they got the video, they just played it on their phone. We hosted it on YouTube. And these were really short, cheeky videos, which talked about the histories of some of the family businesses, and they ended in riddles. They had to find out some lessons from these family business, and then we had fun, really crazy and fun hints if they couldn't solve the question. So we sent them something like this. We also had a funky prize. For those of you who are Chinese, this will be familiar to you, which is a bird's nest. But those of the students who come from Western countries, there's a little bit of a yuck factor to this bird's nest, and I would challenge them to drink it for the winning team. Now, let me go behind the scene. How did we design the game? We actually did not spend any money. I didn't have any budget. So we hosted, I recorded all our videos with Zoom. We hosted them on a free YouTube channel. We used Excel to plan out the whole game. And we had WhatsApp groups to communicate with the students. And here you see the sort of like our control room and my student assistant, Mirza, who later became my business partner. But I have to say it took a long time. So this is a photo from 2021, still in COVID. The students went all crazy. They are, as you can see, they're laughing and they have all the crazy photos. So they really loved the game. But then I realized that, it wasn't so perfect. So I needed to do some adaptation to it. So what were my goals? I wanted to do experiential learning, reinforce my course concepts, and I wanted them to have fun because the times were so gloomy. So these were some of the results of my surveys that I did with different groups of students. It looks pretty good, but I thought it could be better, for such an exciting outdoor experience that they were going through. So here's some things I discovered and that I improved. So originally, I think we all had this tendency that when we did videos, they were way too long. And especially if you're standing in the middle of the street in front of a major building, you can't really listen to a long video. So I made them very, very short. Really capturing the essence, which took a lot of time, but after I did it, it was cool. Some of the routes were a little bit too long, so people lost interest. They wanted to go and have beers. So we optimized the routes. They could walk to all of the different buildings. Um, Balance fun and learning. They had a lot of fun, but they didn't learn as much sometimes. Sometimes they focused too much on the learning and they didn't have fun. They were too serious. So I started to build different feedback loops, which also had a cheeky and fun element, but really kept them into the material. I also realized that what comes before the game is hugely important for their learning and also the how much they enjoy it. So I learned how to fire them up from the beginning with prompting them with fun, sort of messages and are you ready and challenging them, etc. So by the time they got to their first location, they were all like super, super excited. So it was a really cool experience. I also realized, which is also the same if you use simulations, that people tend to compete, but they don't learn. So that was not good, obviously, because learning was the key idea here. So I de-emphasized the competition element a little bit more, and I did lots of feedback loops to them. Even inside the game, when they finished one riddle, I reinforced that, okay, this is what we have learned. Now we go to the next venue, next building. So, I had to and then after the game, I did a debrief, and at the next class, I did another debrief, etc. So by doing multiple layers of debriefs, it became a lot better. I also realized I needed a lot more moderation. So we hired an extra person who was with us. So it's actually 3 people running the game in real time. They also needed a lot of the right gear, like headphones and shorts, because Singapore is very hot, and umbrellas. Sometimes it rained and poured, but most of the time they took it quite well. Now, after that, it was amazing. This whole gamification really, really worked. The students went all out. And they were so surprised that they always thought that these big buildings in front of us are multinationals, but they realized that these are a different type of multinational. They're family business groups. So just standing there and experiencing that and discovering that was a really, really big insight. And they're still emailing me about it today. Then something else happened. I kept on, sharing about this gamified walking workshop on my LinkedIn, and talking to people about it. And there was this one Singapore government institution, which is the registry of Singapore government, called ACRA, the company registry. And they said they wanted to do the game for their employees. So I was like, okay, that's great. Here's my price. So they said, we're okay with your price, but you have to have a real company because we can't pay you as a person. I'm like, oh God, what to do now? So that's where, me and my student assistant Mirza incorporated this company called Tycoon Trails in 2021. And that's when we discovered that executives love it too. And we rolled out the company, and we're still doing this game for all kinds of incoming groups into Singapore, which includes people like private bankers, lawyers, and sometimes visiting EMBA programs as well. So that was cool. Although I have to say I'm a little bit busy, and Mirza was hired by Goldman Sachs, so he's also very busy. So it's a little bit low profile, the company, but we have plans to make it a single player game and do it without moderation, and perhaps offer it on Airbnb experiences in the future. So a few more lessons learned before I close. I have to tell you that this was a great success, but it wasn't an overnight success. It took really, I would say it took 1,000,000 hours, and that it really felt that way. Even though we didn't spend anything, it was really, really time intensive. And we really had to perfect it after several rounds of adaptation. And even then, you know, it's mostly above 30 degrees in Singapore, so not everyone is up for it. So there's always going to be people who give low scores for the game, but the rest of them is like, wow, off the chart high. So I think the real impact was that, you know, this was the highlight of their program. And I think as a professor, you want to, you know, be the one that gives them that highlight course that they will always remember even after 10 years. And the other thing I learned was that even though my game was unique and a bit weird, and people have trouble understanding what it really is, our knowledge is unique. And if we spend those million hours, we really have a, you know, a concept that can stand on its own, and it's really, really valuable. So that's why the company worked. So those are some of the lessons I learned. And these days, our students are Instagram generation, and they want to take pictures of everything. So that element of, you know, the experience that can be visualized and shared with social media about how you are learning in a context is just really, really important to them. And it will upgrade their engagement with the material that we are teaching. So my last slide, I discovered after 1 million hours that gamified experiential learning really works. And despite a long time, I would encourage you to think of something like this, where you combine an element of fun, experience, and sharing key insights from your course. That was my presentation, and I will hand back to Jean.
Great, thank you, Marlene. It's very interesting. You know, those buildings look so familiar to me because I'm actually from Singapore. All right, so this is a very great two presentations, and so we're going to take some questions, and we read some questions. You want to try to answer them?
Sure. Marlene, by the way, I thoroughly enjoyed that presentation, so thank you for that. So the question that came in for me was, how did you come up with the initial case that would be read by MBA students? Did you work with the company simultaneously so that it is written in synchronization with the RSLM protocol? The honest truth is no. The case was written much before this Nanjing module was developed. And in fact, the case about Sherborne wasn't even written by me. So I think the reality is the vast majority of teaching cases just get written, and then a small minority of them are also amenable to using them in the real situation learning approach. I don't think the case has to be written particularly differently. The more important thing is actually getting access and having something to see. So this is also an issue because sometimes there are software companies, for example, there isn't much of a company tour to be had. And so that also doesn't work super well. I think in the case of Nanjing, you had an exhibition area, but also an actual manufacturing site. With the chocolate company, they have this brilliant chocolate theater. And so, I would say, you know, teaching cases should just be written whenever there's a good opportunity to do that. And then you try and work out which ones can be used in a real situation context. Equally, there are some companies that are very willing to have students to come for a company visit, but aren't really interested in or willing to have a case written. And so sometimes you just need to do those standalone company visits, some cases, or most cases, the traditional classroom-based teaching, and where possible, bring in the protagonist or a guest speaker of some sort. So this is a small numbers game for sure. Anyway, the answer to your question is the case was written as a case, and then we found you know, a few companies where we could also teach it in the classroom, in their company.
Right. Just because I also use this real situation learning in Ningbo for the family business course that I conduct here for MBA students. I write the case before I go to the company. And the companies are very cooperative. And then, so when you write the case, and then students can actually discuss the content. And then I usually get them to do the analysis before they visit the company, and they can really ask very good, insightful questions. And so that could be helpful. But then it's very time consuming. You need to invest a lot of time to get the course ready, but at the same time, it's very impactful for the students. Yep. Okay, so we have this question from Marlene. Can you read? Do you see it?
Yeah, there's a question from Sejun.
Right. Yeah,
Question?
right. Yeah, Mr. Jun. Yep.
So what if the students are not good at or don't like playing the game? Actually, it's not really difficult, you know. So they go to a venue, they get some insights, and then they get a riddle. I'll give you an example. They go to a building and they'll learn a little bit about the history of the family, and they discover that some of the brothers in that family were kicked out in favor of one other brother, and they went to another country and became very successful there. So the riddle is comparing the ranking on the Forbes Global Rich list of the Singapore-based one and the Malaysia-based one. And then so it's not very difficult. So what they will realize is that the one who got kicked out became much bigger than the one who continued the company. So, you know, it's really about a discovery of some insight into that global family business. So it's not hard. Anyone can do it. Just have to keep up the motivation, and we do that by firing them up all the time. How about the opposite situation, says Sejun? Have you had any students who were able to game the simulation even without learning, right? Yeah, I realized that ChatGPT gives the answers to some of my riddles, or sometimes it gives the wrong answer too. So I have to, but not all. So it's actually quite difficult to use ChatGPT, but that's one of the worries that I have. Some of them are not super, you know, they get hot or whatever it is. But I think most of them are very competitive. So they actually want to win against the other teams. And when they get their next venue, they go and run because they want to be the number one of this game. So which is also, I think, answering another question by an anonymous attendee who said, what makes the experience gamification? Well, it's gamified because they're different teams and they compete against each other. Which gives that extra impetus for them to really solve the riddles and go fast through the game. And then we give them points if they're faster. So I hope that answers your questions, Sejun and Anonymous.
We also have questions from old friends. Klaus Meyer, is that for you?
Oh, I've never heard of Klaus. Okay, so Klaus, you must recognize the company that we talked about, because this was from a project that you were heavily involved in, and you're a co-author of the book that I referred to, and so on. Now, clearly, if you're going to do this real situation learning thing, before long, the case becomes not that recent, which then puts a lot of which then makes the interaction with the executive extremely important, right? Because that's what makes the case much more contemporary, as indeed seeing the facilities at that point in time. And so what happens certainly in the case of Sherborne is you would get the update in terms of how the post merger integration had progressed and so on. And so partly what I would do at the end of my case teaching is sort of also create a little bit of a sense of suspense, which is, okay, now that we've discussed everything that we have, how do you think things panned out? Do you think the integration became closer, or it remained kind of light touch? And then we hear what people might guess, and then I just leave it at that. And then when we're talking with the executives, we hear, and then students go, that's what happened, or, you know, and then the executives also share how things didn't go to plan, or what were some of the unexpected developments. And I think that then compensates for the fact that the text which sometimes they're reading only on the bus when we're driving from the hotel to the company, that might be slightly dated, but then when they leave the premises, and this is what then having the post executive sharing session with the faculty also allows us to do. The other thing I have considered, but haven't done yet, say, for example, in the Zotter China case, is to write a case B, which brings the story up to date. Because in a lot of the executive sharing in the past couple of years, what we've heard is how they've had to deal with COVID. So as a chocolate theater, COVID had a very direct impact. They had to shut down. And then when China suppressed the virus and people could not go outside easily, the Zotter Chocolate Theater in Shanghai suddenly became a big tourist attraction because it felt like an international tourist attraction here in Shanghai. So they even managed to work with the authorities so that one of the stops on the ferry ride was Zotter. So again, when the students hear all of this in the discussion, then it's fine that the case is relatively old. And actually what I might do is write the next case because, and this is the answer to the other part of the question, how do you get multi-year commitment? We have institutionalized this process of creating this teaching and learning basis and give a plaque, and it has to be renewed every 3 years. And Siebes is lucky enough that there are alumni, both Sherborne and Zotter. The key decision makers on the ground in China are both Siebes alumni. They seem to value having that connection. So that's a bit of good fortune that we leverage.
Right. And also we try to maintain and nurture that relationship, and by inviting them to the campus to attend some of our forums, seminars, and so that they can gain something from us too. So, maintaining and embracing the alumni relationship is actually very important for a business school. Yeah. All right. Okay. Carl has questions for you.
Okay, have you tried to do this virtually, potentially filming a company tour or having someone walk around the company with the camera live and then having a Q&A with the key manager from the firm and wrap up? That would not be as good as doing in person, but might have broader use, as not all are located near companies with good cases about them. Absolutely, and not out of choice. But during COVID, although China at one point was doing great, the restrictions were so severe that if there was even one case in an area, then you couldn't go. So in 1 year, we moved the course from Nanjing to Shanghai. Even so, on day 3 of 3, because there was one positive case in the Zhangjiang High-Tech Park area, we were not able to go. And so we were forced that day to actually then have the thing through Zoom, and even the company tour was done online. And so it is feasible, but we had evaluations after every company visit in addition to an evaluation overall. And the evaluation for this was noticeably lower, which I found very disappointing because I thought this was done extremely well, even on Zoom. And it helped that it was a robotics company. So actually, even on Zoom, looking at what the robots could do, it was amazing. And to think this is a Chinese company doing this robotic stuff, and they had a co-founder in Singapore, and that was the base for then internationalizing. I just thought the story was great, and I thought we still had a great experience via Zoom. So clearly, I think somehow maybe in the Chinese audience, there's pushback. They do want to have in-person interaction. But the answer is yes, it is possible. At least once in this case, I had no choice but to do this. And I personally thought it went very well.
Good. Any more questions? Someone asked whether we can send the recording. Yes, we will be able to upload the recording. Okay, we have another questions from,
Do you find any impediments, like not being able to discuss the mistakes the company did because it is done in the company itself? No, certainly not in either of these examples. And I guess this is, we're lucky, the CEO of Sherborne and the China CEO for Zota, they're both very candid. Many times the lady at Zota just sort of very openly talks about mistakes they've made, some run-ins they've had with a local journalist, and it's never been a problem. I think the fact that it's on the company premises is less important than how candid the individual is willing to be, whether they come to your classroom or whether they play host to you. I think that may be the more important thing.
great. All right, there is no more questions here. Maybe I have a questions from Marlene.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I think experiential wise, it's so good and interesting and fun for the students. How do you link those learning to link to theory concepts? How do you do the integration? Or
Okay,
it's
yeah.
just purely on an experiential?
No, I think the integration is key, which is sharing. So most of the locations that we visit are also cases in the class, and the insights from these cases will only be discovered in layers. So the game might be the first layer, but then they will later have the case, and they will see what was really behind that riddle that they had. So the game is in the course setting, it didn't stand on its own. It was tightly integrated with the whole experience and all the key learning points that I had for each session. So I made sure that all these learning points were in at least one or two of the locations in the game.
That's interesting. And then so all the places, the buildings they visit will have a case. Is that
Not all of that is a
not all of them?
case. Many of them were cases, but sometimes I used it as an example. But I made sure to tightly integrate these examples into my course, because in the end, I want them to get a feel of the landscape, the issues, the problems, the challenges of these global family businesses. And I want them to get familiar with that world, let's say. So I kept on integrating all the physical experience going there, as well as cases and examples in my class. So I think this idea of integration is very important for learning.
Right. Good. All right. So we have no more open questions. It's about time. Right. So thank you, Marlene, and thank you, Shamin. And it's very interesting, very good sharing, very good illustration, and I personally learned a lot. And thank you, audience, for your attendance and for your participation. Thank you so much, and hope to see you next time. We will have the recording. I will send the recording to the organization, and then hopefully they will upload for you. Thank you and good night. And see you. Ciao. Next time.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Marlene, I'll see you in Singapore.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
Charmaine,
Thank
thank
you.
you.